Bahrain. Type of government. The Kingdom of Bahrain became an independent nation in 1971 and has been led by a hereditary constitutional monarchy since 2002. The king is the head of state, and an appointed prime minister is the head of the government. Bahrain has a bicameral legislature, the Majlis al-Watani, or National Assembly. Its lower house is elected by the people, and its upper house is appointed by the king. Executive power is vested in the king together with his appointed council of ministers. Legislative power rests with the king and the National Assembly. Background. Bahrain encompasses an archipelago of 36 low-lying desert islands located in the Persian Gulf between the Qatar peninsula and the eastern coast of Saudi Arabia. The largest island is referred to as Bahrain or Manama, which is the name of the nation's densely populated capital. The main island also contains Mina Salman, the country's primary port. Bahrain's total land area is about 240 square miles, an area roughly 4 times that of Washington, D.C. The Bahrain region has been settled since 3000 BC, but its current state was largely shaped by European intervention starting in the 16th century. From 1522 until 1602 Bahrain was controlled by the Portuguese, and then Arabs and Persians battled over the islands. In 1782–83, the al-Khalifa family, originally from Kuwait, captured Bahrain from the Persians for good. Afterward, to retain its hold on the region, particularly against intrusion by the Turkish Ottoman Empire, the ruling family sought the assistance of England, which made Bahrain a British protectorate in the 19th century. The first of several protective treaties between Bahrain and Britain was made in the 1820s. Large supplies of oil were discovered in Bahrain in 1932. Bahrain was the first Arab Gulf state to discover and prosper from the extraction and sale of oil. The government-owned Bahrain Petroleum Company refinery was built in 1935, the same year the British stationed their regional naval headquarters in Bahrain. In 1968 the two nations agreed to end their long-standing arrangement, and Britain announced it would be pulling its military out of the area by 1971. Bahrain initially planned to join the 8 other states in the region that were also losing British protection, Qatar and the 7 Sheikdoms currently part of the United Arab Emirates, but was unable to agree on terms. Bahrain became independent on August 15, 1971. Of the nation's nearly 700,000 residents, 63% are ethnic Bahraini, with the remaining 37% being a mix of Asians, 19%, Arabs, 10%, and Iranians, 8%, many of whom are in the country as laborers. Some 98% of Bahrain's residents are Muslim, the state religion, with about 70% of those being Shia and 30% identifying as Sunni. Although some 2/3 of the indigenous population is Shia Muslim, the ruling family and the majority of government, military, and business leaders are Sunni Muslims. It is legal to practice other religions, and the country is home to a small number of Christians. Government structure. King Hamad is the chief executive or head of the state. Khalifa bin Salman al-Khalifa, 1935, is the prime minister, the head of the government. The Council of Ministers, or Cabinet, is appointed by the king and is led by the prime minister, who is also appointed by the king. The Bahraini Legislature, called the National Assembly, consists of the Shura Council, or Consultative Council, 40 members appointed to 4-year terms by the king, and the Council of Representatives or Chamber of Deputies, 40 members directly elected by the public to serve 4-year terms. In keeping with the traditional Islamic administrative system of majlis, people are allowed to petition the king directly, even if, in reality, this generally occurs only to exchange pleasantries. In terms of more localized government, the kingdom also includes 5 governorates, each managed by an appointed governor, and 12 administrative subdivisions or municipalities. All citizens age 18 and older have the right to vote. Women were granted the right to run for a political office in 2002, but none succeeded in that election. The entrance of women into the Bahraini government began with the appointment of Nada Had as Minister of Health in 2004 and Fatima al-Balushi as Minister of Social Development in 2005. The constitution includes numerous provisions guaranteeing social programs that bolster family life. The government provides medical care at no or low cost and free education from primary school to a technical college level, about 12 years. Since the 1970s, a public welfare system has funded unemployment, sick leave, maternity benefits, and a pension system. Political parties and factions. The ruling family of Bahrain, the al-Khalifas, are related to the al-Sabah family of Kuwait and Saudi Arabia's ruling clan, the House of Saud. Officially, political parties are banned in Bahrain. However, political societies, or blocs, have been tolerated since 2001 and were formally sanctioned in 2005. The political societies range from the communist left to the Islamist right. Various factions include branches of Hezbollah and other pro-Iranian militant Islamic groups. Since the constitutional reforms were approved in 2001 and 2002, several public service, human rights-oriented non-governmental and advocacy organizations have been founded, including the Bahrain Human Rights Society and the Supreme Council for Bahraini Women. Beginning with municipal elections in 2002, a variety of political groups fielded and campaigned for candidates. In the parliamentary and municipal elections of 2006, al-Wafaq, the largest Shia political society, won the largest number of seats in the publicly elected Council of Representatives. Trade unions, all of which belong to the General Federation of Workers' Trade Unions in Bahrain, were allowed beginning in 2002. Major events. At the time of its independence, the country was led by Sheikh Isa bin Salman al-Khalifa, 1933 to 1999, the nation's monarch, who became both Emir and Prime Minister of the newly formed independent state. Bahrain created a constitution and elected its first parliament in 1973. However, 2 years later, in August 1975, after the Prime Minister charged that the National Assembly was hampering the effectiveness of the government, the Emir disbanded the parliament. He then ruled by decree. When Sheikh Isa died in March 1999, his son Sheikh Hamad bin Isa al-Khalifa, 1950, ascended the throne. During the 1990s, Bahrain experienced violent protests, including hotel and restaurant bombings orchestrated by the marginalized Shia majority, with suspected Iranian involvement. More than 1,000 people were arrested and held without trial. They were released when political reforms took hold after 2001. During the 1991 Gulf War, Bahraini pilots flew airstrikes over Iraq, and the country was used as a base for military operations. Bahrain has since provided logistical and base support toward enforcing United Nations sanctions and preventing the illegal smuggling of oil from Iraq. In November 2000, seeking to bring political reform to his country, Sheikh Hamad established a committee to transform Bahrain from a hereditary emirate to a constitutional monarchy. The National Action Charter, created by the committee, was overwhelmingly approved in a national referendum in February 2001. A year later, on February 14, 2002, Sheikh Hamad declared Bahrain to be a constitutional monarchy, instead of an emirate, and his title changed from emir to king. Municipal elections occurred in May 2002, the first since 1957, and the bicameral parliament was restored. Public elections for the Chamber of Deputies, the lower house of parliament, were held in October. The other house is the Consultative Council, which has equal voting rights to the elected branch and is appointed by the king. The full assembly held its first legislative session from December 2002 to December 2006. Elections for the subsequent parliament occurred in the fall of 2006. In addition to the reformed parliament, a new constitution was also effected in February 2002. It declares Islam the state religion and Islamic Sharia law the basis of Bahraini law, but expressly protects freedom of religion. The constitution guarantees education, social welfare, rights of private ownership, and equality before the law. As part of his restructuring plan, the king established an independent body to investigate government embezzlement. He pardoned all political prisoners and detainees, including those who had been imprisoned, exiled, or detained on security charges. He also abolished a system that permitted the government to detain individuals without trial for several years. The Supreme Judicial Council was created in 2001 to establish a judiciary independent of the government. Bahraini law is based on both Sunni and Shia Sharia religious laws, tribal law, and other civil codes and regulations. 21st century. Revenues from oil and natural gas currently account for about 76% of Bahraini government income. However, Bahrain's oil reserves are considered relatively small, and as of 2006, its reserves were expected to last only another 10 to 15 years. In anticipation of its oil reserves shrinking, Bahrain is making a concerted effort to lessen its dependence on oil revenues. As such, the nation is also focusing its commerce on international banking, aluminum smelting, and petroleum processing. Efforts are also underway to make Bahrain a regional hub for higher education. In 2004, negotiations resulted in the U.S.-Bahraini Free Trade Agreement, which reduced or eliminated tariffs on trade between the two countries and provided substantial opportunities for U.S. corporate investment in Bahrain. In 2001, the International Court of Justice settled a long-standing boundary dispute between Bahrain and Qatar. In resolving the case, the court awarded the ancestral home of the al-Khalifa family, Zubarah on the Qatar peninsula, to Qatar based on the fact that Qatar had held Zubarah since the 19th century. The Hawar Islands, however, were awarded to Bahrain, in a decision based on a previous determination by Britain during its colonial administration. The 2001 decision also established a maritime boundary between the disputants and ended tensions over underwater rights and possession of reefs. The reefs, in particular, posed significant legal issues as they were submerged during high tide but at low tide could be occupied like islands. Al-Araid, Jawad Salim. A line in the sea, the Qatar v. Bahrain border dispute in the World Court. Berkeley, California, North Atlantic Books. 2003. Kingdom of Bahrain, e-government. Accessed on August 15, 2007. U.S. Department of State, Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs. Background note, Bahrain. Accessed on August 15, 2007. Bahrain, Lissani/Brent/Arabic, about this sound al-Bahrain, officially the Kingdom of Bahrain, Arabic, about this sound Mamlakat al-Bahrain, is a small Arab monarchy in the Persian Gulf. It is an island country consisting of a small archipelago centered around Bahrain Island, situated between the Qatar Peninsula and the northeastern coast of Saudi Arabia, to which it is connected by the 25 kilometers, 16 miles, King Fahd Causeway. Bahrain's population is 1,234,567, circa 2010, including 666,172 non-nationals. 9. It is 780 square kilometers in size, making it the third smallest nation in Asia after the Maldives and Singapore. 10. Bahrain is the site of the ancient Bilman civilization. 11. It has been famed since antiquity for its pearl fisheries, which were considered the best in the world into the 19th century. 12. Bahrain was one of the earliest areas to convert to Islam, AD 628. Following a period of Arab rule, Bahrain was occupied by the Portuguese in 1521, who in turn were expelled in 1602 by Shabbas I of the Safavid dynasty under the Persian Empire. In 1783, the Bani Utbah clan captured Bahrain from Nasser al-Madkar and it has since been ruled by the al-Khalifa royal family, with Ahmed al-Fada as Bahrain's first Hakim. In the late 1800s, following successive treaties with the British, Bahrain became a protectorate of the United Kingdom. In 1971, Bahrain declared independence. Formerly a state, Bahrain was declared a kingdom in 2002. In 2011, the country experienced protests inspired by the regional Arab Spring. 13. Bahrain had the first post-oil economy in the Persian Gulf. 14. Since the late 20th century, Bahrain has invested in the banking and tourism sectors. 15. Many large financial institutions have a presence in Manama, the country's capital. Bahrain has a high Human Development Index and was recognized by the World Bank as a high-income economy. In Arabic, Bahrain is the dual form of Bahr, sea, so al-Bahrain means the two seas, although which two seas were originally intended remains in dispute. 16. The term appears 5 times in the Quran, but does not refer to the modern island, originally known to the Arabs as Awal, but rather to all of eastern Arabia, most notably Al-Khatif and Al-Hassa. 16. Today, Bahrain's two seas are instead generally taken to be the bay east and west of the island. 17. The seas north and south of the island. 18. Or the salt and fresh water present above and below the ground. In addition to wells, there are areas of the sea north of Bahrain where fresh water bubbles up in the middle of the salt water is noted by visitors since antiquity. An alternate theory with regard to Bahrain's toponymy is offered by the Al-Khalifa region, which suggests that the two seas were the Great Green Ocean, the Persian Gulf, and a peaceful lake on the Arabian mainland. Another supposition by al-Jawahiri suggests that the more formal name Bahri, lit. Belonging to the sea, would have been misunderstood and so was opted against. Until the late Middle Ages, Bahrain referred to the region of eastern Arabia that included southern Iraq, Kuwait, Al-Hassa, Qatif, and Bahrain. The region stretched from Basra in Iraq to the Strait of Hormuz in Oman. This was Iqlim al-Bahrain's Bahrain province. The exact date at which the term Bahrain began to refer solely to the Awal archipelago is unknown. 21. The entire coastal strip of eastern Arabia was known as Bahrain for a millennium. The island and kingdom were also commonly spelled Bahrain 1223, into the 1950s. Bahrain was home to the Dilmun civilization, an important Bronze Age trade center linking Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley. 24. Bahrain was later ruled by the Assyrians and Babylonians. 25. From the 6th to 3rd century BC, Bahrain was part of the Persian Empire ruled by the Achaemenian dynasty. By about 250 BC, Parthia brought the Persian Gulf under its control and extended its influence as far as Oman. The Parthians established garrisons along the southern coast of the Persian Gulf to control trade routes. 26. During the Classical era, Bahrain was referred to by the ancient Greeks as Tylos, the center of pearl trading, when the Greek admiral Nearchus serving under Alexander the Great landed on Bahrain. 27. Nearchus is believed to have been the first of Alexander's commanders to visit the island, and he found a verdant land that was part of a wide trading network. He recorded that on the island of Tylos, situated in the Persian Gulf, are large plantations of cotton trees, from which are manufactured clothes called sindans, of strongly differing degrees of value, some being costly, others less expensive. The use of these is not confined to India, but extends to Arabia. 28. The Greek historian Theophrastus states that much of Bahrain was covered by these cotton trees and that Bahrain was famous for exporting walking canes engraved with emblems that were customarily carried in Babylon. 29. Alexander had planned to settle the Greek colonists on Bahrain, and although it is not clear that this happened on the scale he envisaged, Bahrain became very much part of the Hellenized world. The language of the upper classes was Greek, although Aramaic was in everyday use, while Zeus was worshipped in the form of the Arabian sun god Shams. 30. Bahrain even became the site of Greek athletic contests. The Greek historian Strabo believed the Phoenicians originate from Bahrain. Herodotus also believed that the homeland of the Phoenicians was Bahrain. This theory was accepted by the 19th century German classicist Arnold Heeren, who said that, in the Greek geographers, for instance, we read of two islands, named Tiras or Tylos, and Arad, Bahrain, which boasted that they were the mother country of the Phoenicians, and exhibited relics of Phoenician temples. The people of Tyre in particular have long maintained Persian Gulf origins, and the similarity in the words Tylos and Tyre has been commented upon. However, there is little evidence of any human settlement at all on Bahrain during the time when such migration had supposedly taken place. The name Tylos is thought to be a Hellenization of the Semitic Dilmun, from Dilmun. The term Tylos was commonly used for the islands until Ptolemy's Geographia, when the inhabitants are referred to as Tylu and Oi. Some place names on Bahrain go back to the Tylos era, for instance the name of Arad, a residential suburb of Mohrik, is believed to originate from Aratos, the ancient Greek name for Mohruk. In the 3rd century, Ardashir, the first ruler of the Sassanid dynasty, marched on Oman and Bahrain, where he defeated Sanatruk, the ruler of Bahrain. 40. At this time, Bahrain was known as Mismahig, which in Middle Persian/Pahlavi means you fish. Bahrain was also the site of worship of an ox deity called Awal. Worshippers built a large statue to Awal in Mohruk, although it has now been lost. For many centuries after Tylos, Bahrain was known as Awal. By the 5th century, Bahrain became a center for Nestorian Christianity, with the village Samohij 42 as the seat of bishops. In 410, according to the Oriental Syriac Church synodal records, a bishop named Batai was excommunicated from the church in Bahrain. As a sect, the Nestorians were often persecuted as heretics by the Byzantine Empire, but Bahrain was outside the empire's control, offering some safety. The names of several Mohruk villages today reflect Bahrain's Christian legacy, with al-Dir meaning the monastery. Bahrain's pre-Islamic population consisted of Christian Arabs, mostly of Al-Qais, Persians, Zoroastrians, Jews, and Aramaic-speaking agriculturalists. According to Robert Bertram Sargent, the Bahraini may be the Arabized descendants of converts from the original population of Christians, Arameans, Jews and Persians inhabiting the island and cultivated coastal provinces of eastern Arabia at the time of the Muslim conquest. The sedentary people of pre-Islamic Bahrain were Aramaic speakers and to some degree Persian speakers, while Syriac functioned as a liturgical language. Muhammad's first interaction with the people of Bahrain was the Al-Qudr invasion. Muhammad ordered a surprise attack on the Banu Salim tribe for allegedly plotting to attack Medina. He had received news that some tribes were assembling an army on Bahrain and preparing to attack the mainland. But the tribesmen retreated when they learned Muhammad was leading an army to do battle with them. Traditional Islamic accounts state that al-Ala al-Hadrami was sent as an envoy during the expedition of Zayd ibn Haritha, Hizma, to the Bahrain region by the Prophet Muhammad in AD 628, and that Munsar ibn Sawa al-Tamimi, the local ruler, responded to his mission and converted the entire area. In AD 899, the Karmatians, a millenarian Ismaili Muslim sect, seized Bahrain, seeking to create a utopian society based on reason and redistribution of property among initiates. Thereafter, the Karmatians demanded tribute from the Caliph in Baghdad, and in AD 930 sacked Mecca and Medina, bringing the sacred black stone back to their base in Asa, in medieval Bahrain, for ransom. According to historian al-Juwayni, the stone was returned 22 years later in 951 under mysterious circumstances. Wrapped in a sack, it was thrown into the Great Mosque of Kufa in Iraq, accompanied by a note saying, "By command we took it, and by command we have brought it back." The theft and removal of the black stone caused it to break into 7 pieces. Following their AD 976 defeat by the Abbasids, the Karmatians were overthrown by the Arab Umayyad dynasty of al-Hassa, who took over the entire Bahrain region in 1076. The Umayyads controlled Bahrain until 1235, when the archipelago was briefly occupied by the Persian ruler of Fars. In 1253, the Bedouin Uzfirids brought down the Umayyad dynasty, thereby gaining control over eastern Arabia, including the islands of Bahrain. In 1330, the archipelago became a tributary state of the rulers of Hormuz, though locally the islands were controlled by the Shiite Jorwanid dynasty of Qatif. In the mid-15th century, the archipelago came under the rule of the Jabarides, a Bedouin dynasty also based in Al-Asad that ruled most of eastern Arabia. In 1521, the Portuguese allied with Hormuz and seized Bahrain from the Jabarid ruler Mihran ibn Zama, who was killed during the takeover. Portuguese rule lasted for around 80 years, during which time they depended mainly on Sunni Persian governors. 21. The Portuguese were expelled from the islands in 1602 by Abbasi of the Safavid dynasty of Persia, which gave impetus to Shia Islam. 61. For the next 2 centuries, Persian rulers retained control of the archipelago, interrupted by the 1717 and 1738 invasions of the Ibis of Oman. 62. During most of this period, they resorted to governing Bahrain indirectly, either through the city of Bushehr or through immigrant Sunni Arab clans. The latter were tribes returning to the Arabian side of the Persian Gulf from Persian territories in the north who were known as Huwala, literally, those that have changed or moved. In 1753, the Huwala clan of Nasser al-Madkur invaded Bahrain on behalf of the Iranians and leader Karim Khan Zand and restored direct Iranian rule. In 1783, al-Madkur lost the islands of Bahrain following his defeat by the Bani Utbah tribe at the 1782 Battle of Zubra. Bahrain was not new territory to the Bani Utbah, they had been a presence there since the 17th century. During that time, they started purchasing date palm gardens in Bahrain. A document shows that 81 years before arrival of the al-Khalifa, one of the sheikhs of the al-Bin Ali tribe, an offshoot of the Bani Utbah, had bought a palm garden from Maryam bint Ahmed al-Sanadi in Sidra Island. The al-Bin Ali were the dominant group controlling the town of Zubra on the Qatar peninsula, 67-68, originally the center of power of the Bani Utbah. After the Bani Utbah gained control of Bahrain, the al-Bin Ali had a practically independent status there as a self-governing tribe. They used a flag with 4 red and 3 white stripes, called the al-Salami flag 69, in Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and the eastern province of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Later, different Arab family clans and tribes from Qatar moved to Bahrain to settle after the fall of Nasser al-Madkur of Bushehr. These families included the al-Khalifa, al-Ma'ada, al-Fadil, al-Manai, al-Noaimi, al-Saladi, al-Sada, al-Thawadi and other families and tribes. The al-Khalifa family moved from Qatar to Bahrain in 1799. Originally, their ancestors were expelled from Mumkazar in Central Arabia by the Ottomans due to their predatory habits of preying on caravans in Basra on trading ships in Shatt al-Arab waterway until Turks expelled them to Kuwait in 1716, where they remained until 1766. Around the 1760s, the al-Jalama and the al-Khalifa clans, both belonging to the Utub Federation, migrated to Zubra in modern-day Qatar, leaving al-Sabah as the sole proprietors of Kuwait. In the early 19th century, Bahrain was invaded by both the Omanis and the al-Sauds. In 1802 it was governed by a 12-year-old child, when the Omani ruler Said Sultan installed his son, Salim, as governor in the Arad fort. 73. In 1816, the British political resident in the Gulf, William Bruce, received a letter from the Sheikh of Bahrain who was concerned about rumor that Britain would support an attack on the island by the Imam of Muscat. He sailed to Bahrain to reassure the Sheikh that this was not the case and drew up an informal agreement assuring the Sheikh that Britain would remain a neutral party. In 1820, the al-Khalifa tribe were recognized by Great Britain as the rulers, al-Hakim in Arabic, of Bahrain after signing a treaty relationship. 75, however, 10 years later they were forced to pay yearly tributes to Egypt despite seeking Persian and British protection. Bahrain Harbor, circa 1870. In 1860, the al-Khalifas used the same tactic when the British tried to overpower Bahrain. Writing letters to the Persians and Ottomans, al-Khalifas agreed to place Bahrain under the latter's protection in March due to offering better conditions. Eventually the government of British India overpowered Bahrain when the Persians refused to protect it. Colonel Pelly signed a new treaty with al-Khalifas placing Bahrain under British rule and protection. Following the Qatari-Bahraini War in 1868, British representatives signed another agreement with the al-Khalifas. It specified that the ruler could not dispose of any of his territory except to the United Kingdom and could not enter into relationships with any foreign government without British consent. In return the British promised to protect Bahrain from all aggression by sea and to lend support in case of land attack. More importantly the British promised to support the rule of the al-Khalifa in Bahrain, securing its unstable position as rulers of the country. Other agreements in 1880 and 1892 sealed the protectorate status of Bahrain to the British. Unrest amongst the people of Bahrain began when Britain officially established complete dominance over the territory in 1892. The first revolt and widespread uprising took place in March 1895 against Sheikh Issa bin Ali, then ruler of Bahrain. Sheikh Issa was the first of the al-Khalifa to rule without Persian relations. Sir Arnold Wilson, Britain's representative in the Persian Gulf and author of the Persian Gulf, arrived in Bahrain from Muscat at this time. The uprising developed further with some protesters killed by British forces. Before the development of petroleum, the island was largely devoted to pearl fisheries and, as late as the 19th century, was considered to be the finest in the world. In 1903, German explorer, Hermann Burchard, visited Bahrain and took many photographs of historical sites, including the old Kaiser Sheikh, photos now stored at the Ethnological Museum of Berlin. 80. Prior to the First World War, there were about 400 vessels hunting pearls and an annual export of more than 30,000 pounds. In 1911, a group of Bahraini merchants demanded restrictions on the British influence in the country. The group's leaders were subsequently arrested and exiled to India. In 1923, the British introduced administrative reforms and replaced Sheikh Issa bin Ali with his son. Some clerical opponents and families such as al-Dawsari left or were exiled to Saudi Arabia and Iran. 81. 3 years later the British placed the country under the de facto rule of Charles Belgrave, who operated as an advisor to the ruler until 1957. 82–83, Belgrave brought a number of reforms such as establishment of the country's first modern school in 1919, the Persian Gulf's first girls' school in 1928–84, and the abolition of slavery in 1937. 85. At the same time, the pearl diving industry developed at a rapid pace. In 1927, Reza Shah, then Shah of Iran, demanded sovereignty over Bahrain in a letter to the League of Nations, a move that prompted Belgrave to undertake harsh measures including encouraging conflicts between Shia and Sunni Muslims in order to bring down the uprisings and limit the Iranian influence. 86. Belgrave even went further by suggesting to rename the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Gulf. However, the proposal was refused by the British government. 82. Britain's interest in Bahrain's development was motivated by concerns over Saudi and Iranian ambitions in the region. A photograph of the first oil well in Bahrain, with oil first being extracted in 1931. The Bahrain Petroleum Company, BAPCO, a subsidiary of the Standard Oil Company of California, SOCAL, discovered oil in 1931 and production began the following year. This was to bring rapid modernization to Bahrain. Relations with the United Kingdom became closer, as evidenced by the British Royal Navy moving its entire Middle Eastern command from Bush in Iran to Bahrain in 1935. In the early 1930s Bahrain Airport was developed. Imperial Airways flew there, including the Handley Page HP-42 aircraft. Later in the same decade the Bahrain Maritime Airport was established, for flying boats and seaplanes. Bahrain participated in the Second World War on the Allied side, joining on September 10, 1939. On October 19, 1940, 4 Italian SM-82S bombers bombed Bahrain alongside Iran oil fields in Saudi Arabia. 90. Targeting Allied-operated oil refineries. 91. Although minimal damage was caused in both locations, the attack forced the Allies to upgrade Bahrain's defenses, an action which further stretched Allied military resources. After World War II, increasing anti-British sentiment spread throughout the Arab world and led to riots in Bahrain. The riots focused on the Jewish community. In 1948, following rising hostilities and looting, most members of Bahrain's Jewish community abandoned their properties and evacuated to Bombay, later settling in Israel, parts Hannah-Carker, and the United Kingdom. As of 2008, 37 Jews remained in the country. In the 1950s, the National Union Committee, formed by reformists following sectarian clashes, demanded an elected popular assembly, removal of Belgrave and carried out a number of protests and general strikes. In 1965 a month-long uprising broke out after hundreds of workers at the Bahrain Petroleum Company were laid off. On August 15, 1971, though the Shah of Iran was claiming historical sovereignty over Bahrain, He accepted a referendum held by the United Nations, and eventually Bahrain declared independence and signed a new treaty of friendship with the United Kingdom. Bahrain joined the United Nations and the Arab League later in the year. 97, the oil boom of the 1970s benefited Bahrain greatly, although the subsequent downturn hurt the economy. The country had already begun diversification of its economy and benefited further from the Lebanese civil war in the 1970s and 1980s, when Bahrain replaced Beirut as the Middle East's financial hub after Lebanon's large banking sector was driven out of the country by the war. Following the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran, in 1981 Bahraini Shia fundamentalists orchestrated a failed coup attempt under the auspices of a front organization, the Islamic Front for the Liberation of Bahrain. The coup would have installed the Shia cleric exiled in Iran, Hujjatu al-Islam Hadi al-Madarisi, as supreme leader heading a theocratic government. 99, in December 1994, a group of youths threw stones at female runners during an international marathon for running bare-legged. The resulting clash with police soon grew into civil unrest. A popular uprising occurred between 1994 and 2000 in which leftists, liberals and Islamists joined forces. 102, the event resulted in approximately 40 deaths and ended after Hamad ibn Isa al-Khalifa became the Emir of Bahrain in 1999. 103, he instituted elections for parliament, gave women the right to vote, and released all political prisoners. 104, a referendum on February 15, 2001 massively supported the National Action Charter. 105, as part of the adoption of the National Action Charter on February 14, 2002, Bahrain changed its formal name from the State, Dawla, of Bahrain to the Kingdom of Bahrain. Protesters gathered at the Pearl Roundabout for the first time on February 15, 2011. The country participated in military action against the Taliban in October 2001 by deploying a frigate in the Arabian Sea for rescue and humanitarian operations. 107, as a result, in November of that year, U.S. President George W. Bush's administration designated Bahrain as a major non-NATO ally. 107, Bahrain opposed the invasion of Iraq and had offered Saddam Hussein asylum in the days prior to the invasion. 107, relations improved with neighboring Qatar after the border dispute over the Hawar Islands was resolved by the International Court of Justice in The Hague in 2001. Following the political liberalization of the country, Bahrain negotiated a free trade agreement with the United States in 2004. Inspired by the regional Arab Spring, Bahrain's Shia majority started large protests against its Sunni rulers in early 2011. The government initially allowed protests following a pre-dawn raid on protesters camped in Pearl Roundabout. 73 to 488. A month later it requested security assistance from Saudi Arabia and other GCC countries and declared a 3-month state of emergency. 132 to 9. The government then launched a crackdown on the opposition that included conducting thousands of arrests and systematic torture. Almost daily clashes between protesters and security forces led to dozens of deaths. Protests, sometimes staged by opposition parties, are ongoing. More than 80 civilians and 13 policemen have been killed as of March 2014. The lack of coverage by Arab media in the Persian Gulf, as compared to other Arab Spring uprisings, has sparked several controversies.